Let us talk about faith. One thing we need to know is that everyone is capable of having faith. As far as we are on earth, no one is excluded. And faith as a theological virtue ends on this earth. In heaven, there is nothing like faith. There won't be any need because they already see God face to face. The object of our faith, the content of our faith, which is to see God, we see Him there in heaven, life and direct. So faith ends on this earth, and everyone, as far as you're a human being on this earth, whether you're a Christian, you're a Muslim, you're a Buddhist, or whether you're a Hindu, or even a traditionalist, whether you practice ATR, you are capable of having faith. And let me shock you also. Devil has faith. Devil believes that Jesus of Nazareth is the Son of God. He also believes and knows that God is a triune God. Devil also knows that Jesus saves us. Devil believes that Jesus is more powerful than he is. In the Gospel of St. Mark chapter 1 from verse 23 to 24, when Jesus entered the synagogue, there was a man with an unclean spirit. Immediately this man saw Jesus, he cried out and said, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are. You are the Holy One of God." So devil knows that Jesus is the Holy One of God. He knows and acknowledges that Jesus is capable of destroying him and that Jesus is the Holy One of God. If devil himself could express that kind of belief and knowledge, it means that every person on this earth is capable of believing and also of knowing whom Jesus is. Even the letter of St. James chapter 2 verse 19 tells us that even demons believe and shudder. But there is a difference between our faith, the human faith, the faith man can have in God, and the faith that the devil itself has of Jesus. Man's faith in God can to an extent be qualified as a true faith, while devil's faith can be qualified as a false faith. Devil's faith is not a true faith because he is forced to believe. The devil cannot but believe that Jesus is the Son of God, the Holy One of God, and is more powerful than he himself, the devil, is. In other words, devil's faith is not a faith out of his free will. What makes faith to be a true faith is that it must resonate from our free will decision to believe. Devil's faith is not out of his free will, it's just out of his knowledge. He knows there's a difference between knowing something and believing truly out of your free will of that thing. Devil is compelled to believe by his knowledge of whom Jesus is. This should bring us to understand the properties of a true faith. In order to differentiate our faith from the faith of devil, we need to understand these things. First one is that faith is both obscure and certain. It is the conviction of things not seen. As letter to the Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1 tells us, it is the conviction. So there is a level of certainty in faith, but it is also obscure in the sense that it is about something not seen. So one of the properties of faith is that it is both certain and obscure. It is a conviction. We are convinced of this thing, but we have not come to full grasp of what it is, or we have not come to fully see it as it is. We shall see this particular object of our faith or the content of our faith as he really is when we come to heaven to behold the beatific vision. But we are convinced, we are certain about this particular content of our faith, that is God himself. The second property of faith is faith is not opposed to reason. There is no way faith can be opposed to reason. Faith and reason are the two wings which we use as Christians to fly unto God. There is no way you claim that you have faith and you throw away your reasoning capacity. God gave you that reasoning to balance your faith. There should be a balance between faith and reason, so that you also give to each one what it requires. And that can help us to understand when Jesus said, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and give to God what belongs to God. Faith and reasoning go together. Faith and work go together. You can't have faith and throw away reasoning, and you can't have reasoning and throw away faith. If you emphasize one more than the other, there will be difficulties in your life. You are not going to find it easy. What it means is that our faith must be basically reasonable. You don't just base your faith on something that you don't know about. Our faith is based on a foundation that is reasonable, on a foundation that we don't put our faith on something that we can't explain to an extent. It is a faith based on something that had happened, that was experiential, it was experienced by some people. It is a faith that is based on the pedigree of God, a faith that is based on what God had done, on what He is, and on what He is capable of doing. St. John tells us that what he is telling us was something that he himself experienced, what he witnessed, what he saw. So it is something that is reasonable. Our faith is a faith that is logical, a reasonable faith. Then the third one is that a true faith is a free faith. In order to claim to believe, there must be a freedom in it. You can't be compelled to believe. And that's why we said in the beginning that the faith of the devil in Jesus, being the Son of God, the Holy One of God, that is capable of destroying him, is a faith that is compelled. Devil cannot but believe that Jesus is more powerful than he himself is. So his faith is not a true faith. Let me talk of a human faith in God. In order for this faith to be true, it must be a free faith. There is no way you claim to believe in God under compulsion. That is not faith. So the third property of faith is that it must be out of free will. It must come out of your being, from the recess of your soul. You must accept the objects of that particular faith in free will. Faith is free and it is expressed freely. You can't be compared. No one can be compared to believe in what he or she does not want to believe in. The fourth property of faith is a supernatural act. Jesus tells us in the Gospel according to St. John chapter 6 from verse 44 to 45 that no one can come to me unless drawn by the Father who sent me. And he said to St. Peter when he confessed him to be the Son of the living God in Caesarea Philippi, St. Matthew chapter 16 verse 17, for in flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. So faith is a supernatural act, a supernatural gift that you will receive from God. No one believes by his own power. Faith is a theological virtue, and virtue is built on grace. And grace is an unmerited favor we receive from God. So faith is an unmerited gift, grace we receive from God. It is by the power of God and by the mercy of God that we come to believe. No one can call Abba Father except by the Spirit of God. It is by the Holy Spirit of God that we are drawn towards God to believe in God. In other words, God is the subject and the object of our faith. He calls us to himself. No one can do that by his own power except by the power of God. So these are the four properties of faith. Number one is that faith is both certain and obscure. Number two is that faith is reasonable. The third one is that faith is free. Our faith is a free faith. We have the freedom to believe, freedom to act in our faith or with our faith and through our faith. Then the fourth one is Faith is a supernatural act and a supernatural gift that we will receive from God.